I stood frozen in the entrance of Bellini's, staring past the hostess into the glass-enclosed banquet room where my granddaughter Emma sat at the center table. She wore a lavender dress, the one I'd sent her last month with a note she'd never acknowledged. Around her, at least 70 people filled the space with laughter and champagne glasses catching the afternoon light. I didn't recognize most of them. "I'm sorry, ma'am," the hostess said again, her smile professional but strained. She glanced at the list on her tablet. "The reservation is for 70 guests exactly, and Mrs. Coleman was very clear about the final count." "Your name isn't here, Mrs. Coleman." My daughter Rachel had started using her married name exclusively about 8 months ago, right after her husband Brian made partner at Morrison and Associates. Before that, she'd been Rachel Hayes, or sometimes Rachel Hayes Coleman when she wanted to sound modern. Now it was just Coleman, as if our family name had been something temporary she'd outgrown. "I'm Emma's grandmother," I said, and my voice came out smaller than I intended. The words caught in my throat like stones. The hostess's expression shifted, her eyes widened, and the practiced smile faltered completely. Let me find Mrs. Coleman for you right away." I stood there in the entryway of Bellini's, a restaurant I'd been coming to for 23 years. This was where Rachel and I had celebrated her high school graduation, where we'd toasted her acceptance to nursing school, where she'd told me, tears streaming down her face, that she was pregnant with Emma. I'd held her hands across a corner booth and promised her everything would be okay, that we'd figure it out together. That booth was probably somewhere behind that wall now, buried under renovations I couldn't afford to keep up with. I was wearing the burgundy blazer I'd bought last month specifically for today. Rachel had seen it when I tried it on during our last shopping trip and said it made me look distinguished. That trip felt like it belonged to someone else's life now, some version of us that had disappeared without my noticing exactly when. Through the glass wall, I watched the hostess navigate between tables, moving quickly in her black dress and heels. She stopped at the head table where Rachel sat beside Brian and his parents. Rachel's face drained of color when the hostess leaned down and whispered something. Brian's expression didn't change at all, that blank, controlled lawyer face he'd perfected over the years. He simply reached for his water glass and took a long drink. Rachel stood slowly, smoothing the front of her champagne-colored dress, the dress I'd helped her choose with money from the check I'd written for this party. She pushed through the glass door, and I noticed she wouldn't quite look at me directly, her eyes fixed somewhere over my left shoulder. "Mom, hi, this is really awkward." Awkward. That was the word my daughter chose. "I wrote you a check for $6,000 for this party," I said, and somehow my voice came out steady even though my hands were shaking. "It cleared 4 days ago, Rachel, and I'm not on the guest list." Rachel's hands twisted together, her French manicure perfect as always. "It's just, Brian's parents invited so many people from the firm, and we had to cap it at 70 because of the venue capacity, and there were all these clients Brian needed to impress, and I was the one you cut. It wasn't a question." She finally met my eyes, and I saw something there I'd never seen before. Shame, yes, I recognized that. But underneath it was something harder, something that made my stomach turn. Resentment, maybe, or calculation. "Brian's parents are paying for Emma's tuition at Worthington Prep," she said quietly. "They bought us the house in Ashford Hills. They're funding Emma's college trust. What were you able to contribute, Mom? Really?" The words hit me like a physical blow. What was I able to contribute? Just 36 years of raising her alone after her father walked out. Just working overnight shifts at County Memorial so she could have dance lessons and summer camp and a childhood better than mine. Just taking out a second mortgage to help with her wedding because Brian's family thought anything under $50,000 was embarrassing. Just the $18,000 I'd been depositing into a separate education fund for Emma, the one Rachel didn't know existed, the one I'd been building for 4 years by skipping vacations and wearing the same winter coat since 2012 and eating oatmeal for dinner more nights than I wanted to count. "I see," I said quietly. Brian appeared behind Rachel then, his hand settling on her shoulder in a way that looked possessive. "Victoria, listen. This really isn't about the adults in the room. We wanted to keep Emma's celebration intimate, focused on her actual peer group, her classmates from Worthington, families from Ashford Country Club, that kind of thing. I'm sure you understand." Worthington Prep, Ashford Country Club. I looked at this man my daughter had married, in his tailored navy suit and his Italian leather shoes, with his condescending half smile, and I understood everything with sudden, brutal clarity. I was an embarrassment. The retired nurse from the old neighborhood. The one who still drove a 2011 Toyota Camry with a dent in the passenger door. The one whose house had the original countertops from 1987 and whose bathroom tiles were cracked and whose backyard fence needed paint so badly the neighbors had started complaining. Brian's parents had their winter home in Scottsdale and their summer place on Lake Geneva. They drove matching BMW SUVs. They fit into this world of private schools and country clubs and 70-person birthday parties for 8-year-olds. I didn't fit. I never would. "Mom, please don't make a scene," Rachel whispered, glancing nervously back toward the party. I could see Brian's mother, Diane, watching us through the glass with that carefully neutral expression she'd perfected, the one that said she was observing everything and judging all of it. "I'm not making a scene," I said. I pulled my phone from my purse, the 3-year-old iPhone Rachel always said I needed to upgrade. "I just need to make a couple of calls." "Mom." But I was already walking away, my heels clicking on the marble tile. Behind me, I heard Brian say in that smooth, dismissive tone he used, "She'll get over it. She always does." Those 5 words. They echoed in my head as I pushed through the heavy front doors of Bellini's into the bright Saturday afternoon. She always does. How many times had I swallowed my hurt? How many times had I made myself smaller, quieter, more convenient? When Brian forgot to invite me to their housewarming party. When Rachel stopped calling except when she needed something. A babysitter, a loan, someone to blame when life got complicated. When they'd changed Emma's middle name from Hayes to Diane without telling me, finding out only when I saw her school registration form by accident. I stood on the sidewalk outside the restaurant, watching couples stroll past, watching a father swing his daughter up onto his shoulders. Somewhere inside that building, my granddaughter was celebrating her 9th birthday, and I wasn't there. I wasn't even supposed to be there. I opened my banking app with trembling fingers. The $6,000 check to Rachel showed as processed. I'd written it 3 weeks ago, the memo line reading for Emma's birthday celebration. Rachel had deposited it the same day. My hands shook as I navigated to the payment dispute section. It took me 4 tries to enter my password correctly. $6,000 would be back in my account within 72 hours, minus a $30 processing fee. I'd never cared less about $30 in my entire life. Then I did something I'd been avoiding for months. I called my financial advisor, Richard Chen. Richard had been managing my modest retirement accounts since my husband Michael died 17 years ago. "Victoria, good to hear from you. What can I do for you?" "Richard, it's about the education fund I set up. The one for Emma. Of course, we just passed $18,000 last month with the market uptick. You should be proud of what you've built there. I need to restructure it. Make it a trust with me as the sole trustee. Rachel can't have direct access." There was a long pause. Richard had known me long enough to understand when not to ask questions, but I could hear the concern in his voice. "That's definitely something we can arrange. I'll prepare the paperwork." "Victoria, is everything all right?" "I'm working on it," I said. The second call was harder. I scrolled through my contacts and found Bellini's, but not the main number. I found Anthony Moretti's personal cell. Anthony had managed Bellini's for 18 years. I'd known him since Rachel was in middle school, since the first time we'd come here for her 13th birthday. We'd bonded over the years, over family and food and the struggle of caring for aging parents. I'd helped him navigate the healthcare system when his father had his stroke, sat with him in this very parking lot when the old man finally passed. "Victoria!" His warm voice made my throat tighten. "Are you here for the party? I have something special planned for the birthday girl. That tiramisu she loved last time." "Anthony, I need you to do something for me. It's about the payment." I could hear kitchen noise in the background, the clatter of dishes and the shout of line cooks. "The payment?" Rachel paid half up front. "The balance is due at the end of the event." "The deposit was my check. I'm disputing it with the bank." Silence. Then, very quietly, "Victoria, what happened?" I told him. Not everything, just the essential facts. I wasn't on the guest list. Brian's comment. Rachel's words about what I could contribute. My voice stayed steady through all of it, which surprised me. Anthony exhaled slowly. I could picture him in his small office off the kitchen, running his hand through his silver-streaked hair, the way he did when something made him angry. I wish I could say I'm surprised. I noticed when I reviewed the seating chart earlier, you weren't on it at all. I thought it was a mistake. Some oversight. I almost called Rachel about it. It wasn't a mistake. What do you want me to do?" His voice had changed, become more formal. "The contract says the deposit is non-refundable if there's a cancellation day of, but if there's a payment issue, service stops immediately. That's policy." I closed my eyes. Through the phone, I could hear someone calling Anthony's name, asking about table 7. "I don't want to ruin Emma's birthday, Anthony. I can't pay for a party I'm not welcome at. I can't keep paying to be treated like I'm not good enough." "You know what?" Anthony's voice hardened. "Forget the contract for a minute. You've been coming here for over 20 years. You held my hand at my father's funeral. You brought my family food for a week after he died. If you're not welcome at this party, then neither is my restaurant service." "Anthony, you don't have to." "I know I don't have to. I want to. Some things matter more than business." He paused. "Where are you right now?" "In the parking lot." "Go home, Victoria. Take care of yourself. And maybe don't answer your phone for a while." I drove home in a fog, barely remembering the route I'd driven 1,000 times. My house on Sycamore Street looked exactly as it had for 28 years. The same porch swing Michael had installed the summer before he died. The same flowering dogwood tree we'd planted when Rachel was born. The same flower boxes I painted every spring, though the paint was peeling now and I hadn't gotten around to fixing them. For the first time in years, I didn't look at it and see inadequacy. I looked at it and saw mine, my home, my life, my choices. The calls started 17 minutes after I walked through the front door. First Rachel, 3 times in a row. Then Brian. Then 2 calls from numbers I didn't recognize, probably the restaurant. I let them all go to voicemail. I made myself a cup of tea. Lady Grey, my favorite, the expensive loose-leaf kind Rachel always said was pretentious, and sat in my reading chair by the bay window. The doorbell rang just as the sun started sinking toward the horizon, painting my living room in shades of amber and gold. I almost didn't answer. Some part of me wanted to stay in this quiet space, this moment of peace before whatever came next. But old habits die hard, and some ingrained sense of courtesy made me get up. Diane Coleman stood on my porch, Brian's mother. In all the years Rachel had been married, 7 years this past June, Diane had been to my house exactly 3 times. The first time she'd commented on my charming vintage fixtures. The second time she'd suggested I really should update my kitchen appliances for safety reasons. The third time, she'd brought a real estate agent's card and suggested I might want to downsize to something more manageable. "May I come in?" she asked. I stepped aside, too surprised to do anything else. Diane walked into my living room, and for the first time since I'd known her, she didn't comment on anything. She didn't glance at my bookshelves or my worn carpet or my old television. She just turned to face me, her designer handbag clutched in front of her like armor. "What happened at the restaurant was wrong," she said. I blinked. Whatever I'd expected, accusations, demands, threats, it wasn't this. "I didn't know you weren't on the guest list until I saw you standing at the entrance," she continued. Her voice was controlled, but I could hear something underneath it. Anger, maybe, or shame. I asked Rachel about it afterward, while Brian was dealing with the restaurant situation. She told me. Diane's jaw tightened. "She told me you'd agreed not to come because you weren't feeling well. I was never told about the party," I said quietly. "Rachel deposited my $6,000 check 3 weeks ago." The color drained from Diane's face. She lowered herself slowly onto my sofa, that same floral sofa I'd bought when Rachel was in high school, the one I'd reupholstered twice because I couldn't afford to replace it. Her expensive bag slid to the floor. "Oh, God," she whispered. We sat in silence. Outside, I could hear the neighborhood sounds of a Saturday evening. Children playing, someone mowing their lawn, a dog barking. Life continuing on, indifferent to our small dramas. "This is Brian's doing," Diane finally said. "Jennifer was never like this before she married him." "Rachel made her own choices," I said. Yes, she did." Diane looked at me directly for the first time, and I saw something in her eyes I hadn't expected. Regret. Real regret. "I owe you an apology, Victoria. Several apologies. I've been making you feel small, less than, unimportant, because you don't have what we have financially, but you..." She stopped, swallowed. "You raised a daughter who became a surgical nurse. You bought a home and maintained it for nearly 3 decades. You've worked every day of your adult life, and we've treated you like I'm an embarrassment," I finished. Diane flinched. "Yes. Why are you telling me this?" "Because what happened today was unconscionable." She reached for her bag, pulled out her phone. "I'm showing you this because I think you need to understand what you're dealing with." What Rachel is dealing with, she turned her phone toward me. It was a text conversation between Brian and Rachel, and I recognized Rachel's contact photo, a picture from their anniversary dinner last year. Brian, did you handle the guest list issue? Rachel, yes. Told the restaurant my mother wasn't attending. Too many firm people needed seats. Brian, good. My mother asked if your mother would be there. I said you two weren't particularly close. Let's keep it that way. Rachel, okay. The conversation continued, and each message felt like a small knife. Plans to limit my visits. Brian's comments about my house being depressing and how they needed to shield Emma from settling for less. Rachel's responses were shorter, less enthusiastic, but she'd agreed to all of it. And then, at the bottom, from earlier this afternoon, Brian, the restaurant is threatening to shut down service over a payment issue with your mother's check. Can you believe she'd try to ruin Emma's birthday out of spite? Rachel, I'll handle it. She's always been overly dramatic about money. I handed the phone back. My hands were steady now. I felt strangely calm, like something inside me had finally crystallized into clarity. I'm not showing you this to hurt you more, Diane said. I'm showing you because you need to know it won't get better. Brian will keep pushing you out, and Rachel will continue letting him because she's terrified of losing this life. The house, the status, the security. Why are you doing this? I asked. He's your son. He's my son, and I love him. But I don't like who he's become. Diane stood up, straightening her jacket. He learned this from his father. This need to control everything, to measure people's worth by their bank statements. I went along with it for too many years. I enabled it. I'm not doing that anymore. She walked to the door, then paused with her hand on the doorknob. The party ended badly, by the way. Once the restaurant stopped service, people started leaving. Emma was in tears. Brian was furious. And Rachel? She paused. Rachel looked hollow, like she'd finally seen what she'd become and couldn't stand the sight of it. After Diane left, I sat in my living room as darkness settled around me. My phone buzzed constantly, but I didn't look at it. Instead, I thought about the last 7 years since Brian had entered our lives. How gradually, so gradually, I hadn't noticed the erosion. I'd been erased from my own daughter's life, from my granddaughter's life. How had I let this happen? When had I become so afraid of losing them that I'd accepted being treated as disposable? The next morning, I woke up early and did something I hadn't done in over a year. I called my friend Margaret, my colleague from 23 years at County Memorial, the friend I'd stopped seeing because Rachel said she was negative and bitter. Victoria? Oh my God, I've been so worried about you. You fell off the face of the earth. We talked for 90 minutes. I told her everything. The party, the exclusion, the texts, all of it. When I finished, there was a long silence. Come over right now, Margaret finally said. Tom's making his Sunday waffles, and we're not taking no for an answer. You need people who actually value you. I went, and for the first time in longer than I could remember, I laughed. Really, truly laughed until my sides hurt. 4 days passed before Rachel appeared at my door. It was Thursday afternoon, and I was in my garden pulling weeds, something I'd neglected for months because I was always too busy being available for Rachel's emergencies. I heard the car door slam and looked up to see her walking across my lawn. She looked terrible. No makeup, hair pulled back in a messy bun, wearing yoga pants and an old sweatshirt I recognized from her college days. Her eyes were swollen and red, like she'd been crying for days. She was alone. Can I come in? Her voice was hoarse. I stood up, brushed the dirt from my gardening gloves, and nodded. I led her inside without a word. She sat on my sofa, the same spot where Diane had sat 4 days ago, but she had none of Diane's composure. She lasted maybe 30 seconds before she completely broke down, sobbing so hard her whole body shook. I'm sorry, Mom. I'm so sorry. I don't even know what happened to me. Brian kept saying we needed to fit in with his colleagues, with his family's circle, and you didn't fit the image. And instead of telling him that was insane, that you're my mother and you've sacrificed everything for me, I went along with it. And then it became easier to keep going along than to fight back. And then I started believing it myself. I let her cry. I didn't reach out to comfort her, didn't pat her back or make soothing sounds like I would have a year ago. I just sat in the chair across from her and waited. She needed to get this out, and I needed to hear it, all of it. The party was a complete disaster, she finally continued, wiping her face with the back of her hand. Emma figured out you weren't there about 20 minutes in. She kept looking around for you, asking where you were. And when she asked me directly, Brian told her you were busy with work. But she knew he was lying. She's 9, but she's not stupid, Mom. She stood up in front of everyone, in front of all those lawyers and country club people, and said, "This isn't a real party if Grandma's not here. Grandma comes to everything important." Rachel's voice cracked, and then she refused to blow out her candles, just crossed her arms and said no, and that's when the restaurant staff started clearing plates, and Brian's senior partner asked what was happening, and then people started leaving, and Brian's mother. She pressed her hands to her face. Diane told Brian in front of everyone that he was a disgrace to the family, that he'd turned into his father, and she wouldn't tolerate it anymore. I thought about feeling satisfied hearing this. I thought I would feel some vindication, some sense of justice. But mostly I just felt exhausted, tired in a way that had nothing to do with physical rest. "What do you want from me, Rachel?" She looked up at me, and for just a moment, I saw my little girl again, the one who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms. The one who held my hand at her father's funeral and told me we'd be okay because we had each other. The one who'd called me her hero when she graduated nursing school. I want my mom back. I want to fix this. I don't know if it's possible, but I want to try. And Brian? Her face crumpled again. "We're in counseling. Diane is paying for it, insisted on it. She told Brian that if he doesn't participate seriously, genuinely try to change, she's cutting him off. All of it. The house fund, the trust for Emma, everything. She said she won't stand by and watch him become his father. That she should have stopped it years ago." "That's a start," I said carefully. "But Rachel, I need you to understand something. I disputed that payment not because I was trying to ruin Emma's birthday. I did it because I can't keep paying people to hurt me. Not even you. Especially not you. I don't know if I can trust you again. I don't know if we can get back what we had. I know that too." She wiped her eyes again, smearing mascara across her cheek. "But can we try, please? I know I don't deserve it, but..." I looked at my daughter, really looked at her. She'd lost weight, probably 15 pounds. There were lines around her eyes and mouth that hadn't been there a year ago. And beneath the designer clothes she usually wore, beneath the perfect highlights and the country club polish, I could see how deeply unhappy she was. How lost. On certain conditions, I said. Non-negotiable conditions, anything. You bring Emma here by yourself once a week. No Brian. No schedule conflicts with country club events or firm dinners. No excuses. She and I spend time together. She gets to know her grandmother. And you remember where you came from. Yes. Absolutely yes, and we do therapy. The 3 of us, you, me, and Emma. To repair what's been broken between us, yes, and you pay me back the $6,000. Rachel's eyes widened slightly, but she nodded. Of course, it might take some time, but I'll pay you back every penny. Not because I need the money, I continued, but because you need to understand that my money isn't free anymore. My help isn't free. My love isn't free. It all costs something now, Rachel. It costs respect. She nodded, tears streaming down her face. I'll pay you back. I'll get a job, my own job. I've been thinking about going back to nursing part-time. There's a clinic near our house that's hiring. It might take me 6 months or a year, but I'll pay back every dollar. I stood up. Then we can try. But Rachel, if you or Brian ever make me feel less than again, if you ever exclude me or hide me or treat me like I'm not good enough for your life, I'm done. I'm 64 years old. I don't have time to waste it on people who don't value me, not even my own daughter. Do you understand? She stood too, and for a long moment, we just looked at each other across the space of my small living room. Then she stepped forward and wrapped her arms around me. I let her hug me. I didn't pull away, but I didn't really hug back either. Not the way I used to, not with my whole heart. I just stood there and let her hold on. That was 7 months ago now. Rachel did pay me back. She took a part-time position at Riverside Family Clinic, her first job since Emma was born, and sent me $500 every month until the debt was cleared. She brought Emma over every Thursday afternoon, and those Thursdays became the part of my week I looked forward to most. We baked together, chocolate chip cookies, banana bread, apple pie from my mother's old recipe. We went to the park and fed the ducks. We did art projects that left my kitchen table covered in glitter and paint stains I'd probably never completely remove. Emma talked about school, about her friends, about the story she was writing about a grandmother who was secretly a superhero. She saves people, but nobody knows it's her, Emma explained one Thursday, her tongue sticking out slightly as she concentrated on her drawing. She just looks like a regular grandma, but she's actually the strongest person in the whole world. I had to turn away so she wouldn't see my eyes filling with tears. The therapy was harder than I'd expected. There were sessions where Rachel cried, sessions where I cried, sessions where we both sat in tense silence, while Dr. Hammond, our therapist, tried to mediate between us. There were days when I wanted to quit, when it felt like we were just picking at old wounds without any hope of healing them. But slowly, so slowly I almost didn't notice it happening, we started rebuilding something. Not what we'd had before, that was gone, but something new, something more honest maybe, more careful, built on different foundations this time. Brian kept his distance. I've seen him exactly 4 times since the birthday party. Each time he's been rigidly, formally polite, the way you'd treat a business acquaintance you didn't particularly like but had to maintain relations with. We don't talk about what happened. We don't talk about much of anything, actually, and I'm fine with that. Diane told me the counseling is helping, but that it's slow work. She and I meet for coffee once a month now, usually at the cafe near my house. We're not friends exactly. The gap between our worlds is still too wide for that, but we've reached an understanding. She's trying to undo years of enabling her son's worst behaviors. I'm trying to establish boundaries I should have set years ago. We're both works in progress. As for me, I started living differently. I joined a book club that meets at the library every other Tuesday. We just finished The Nightingale, and I ugly cried through the last 3 chapters. I took a watercolor painting class at the community center and discovered I'm actually pretty terrible at it, but I don't care because it's fun. I went on a 2-week cruise to the Caribbean with Margaret and her husband Tom, something I never would have done before because I was always saving money for Rachel's next crisis or keeping my schedule clear in case she needed me. I look at my house differently now, too. It's not embarrassing. It's not inadequate. It's mine. I bought it with my own salary, filled it with my own memories, maintained it through my own effort. The kitchen cabinets are vintage, not outdated. The garden gnome Rachel gave me when she was 11 is whimsical, not tacky. The crack in my driveway is character, not neglect. And you know what? If someone doesn't like it, they know where the door is. Last Tuesday, Emma asked me something that made my heart stop. "Grandma, can I have my 10th birthday party here at your house?" We were making chocolate chip cookies and she had flour on her nose. Rachel was sitting at my kitchen table, scrolling through her phone, but she looked up sharply when Emma spoke. "Here?" I asked carefully. "Not at Bellini's or somewhere else? I don't like those fancy places," Emma said, her small face serious. "I just want family. You, me, Mom, and Dad, if he promises to be nice. And Grandma Diane, she's family now too. She brings me books and takes me to the bookstore. Did you know that?" I hadn't known that. I glanced at Rachel, who looked surprised as well. "We've been spending time together," Emma continued, focusing very hard on placing chocolate chips in perfect rows on the cookie dough. She said she's sorry she wasn't a better grandma before. She's trying harder now, like you and Mom are trying harder. Rachel's eyes met mine across the kitchen. I could see the question there, the fear. Will you? Can you forgive enough for that? I thought about it, really thought about it. A year ago, the answer would have been an automatic yes. I would have agreed to anything just to keep my daughter and granddaughter in my life. But I'd learned something important in the past 7 months. I was 64 years old. I'd spent most of my life making myself smaller so other people would be comfortable. I'd let people treat me like I wasn't enough because I was terrified of losing them. But here's what I'd finally understood. You can't actually lose someone who doesn't value you. You can only free yourself from the exhaustion of trying to be enough for people who will never think you are. I think that sounds perfect, I said, looking at Emma's hopeful face. And I meant it, not because everything was fixed. It wasn't. Not because the hurt had magically disappeared. It hadn't. But because I'd finally learned the most important lesson of my life, I was enough. I always had been. And anyone who couldn't see that didn't deserve a place at my table, no matter how much money they had or how big their house was or what country club they belonged to. The party is 3 weeks away now. We're keeping it simple. Pizza from Antonio's, the local place that's been around for 40 years. Cake from the grocery store bakery, the kind with too much frosting that Emma loves. Decorations from the dollar store that Emma and I picked out together last Saturday. She wants a craft station where everyone makes friendship bracelets. "Make sure there are enough supplies for you too, Grandma," she said yesterday, wrapping her thin arms around my waist while we planned. "You're not just helping with the party. You're the guest of honor." Guest of honor. At my own house. For my granddaughter's birthday. Exactly where I belong. Rachel has changed in small ways that add up to something significant. She calls me twice a week now just to talk, not because she needs something, but because she wants to hear my voice. She asks my advice about Emma, about work, about life. She listens to my answers instead of just waiting for her turn to talk. Last month, she told Brian's senior partner that she couldn't attend a firm dinner because it was her standing Thursday with her mother and daughter. Brian apparently wasn't happy about it, but she went through with it anyway. That might not sound like much, but for Rachel, it was enormous. 2 weeks ago, she showed up at my door on a Saturday morning with coffee and pastries. "I just wanted to see you," she said. "Is that okay?" We sat on my porch swing, the one that needs oil because it squeaks, and talked for 2 hours about nothing important. Her new patients at the clinic. My book club's latest selection. Whether I should finally replace my ancient microwave or keep nursing it along out of spite. It was ordinary. It was easy. It was everything I'd missed without fully realizing how much I'd missed it. "Mom," she said as she was leaving, standing on my front step with her empty coffee cup. "Thank you. For what? For stopping that payment. For standing up for yourself. For not just—" She paused, searching for words. "For not just accepting it. I needed that. I needed you to show me that I'd become someone I didn't want to be. I wouldn't have seen it otherwise. I just kept going along, kept letting Brian make me into this person who measured everything by money and status, and... God, I was so lost, Mom." "You're finding your way back," I said. "We're finding our way back," she corrected. Together, after she left, I stood in my driveway and looked at my house. Really looked at it. The paint was peeling a bit around the windows. The roof probably had another 5 years left, maybe. The lawn had patches where the grass had given up completely. It wasn't much by Ashford Hills standards. It probably never would be. But it was paid for. It was mine. And in 3 weeks, it would be filled with the people who mattered most, the ones who'd learned that I was worth showing up for. That seemed like enough. More than enough, actually. That seemed like everything. The day of Emma's 10th birthday party arrived with unexpected rain. I woke up to the sound of it drumming against my bedroom window and immediately started revising plans in my head. The craft station would have to be inside instead of on the porch. We'd need to move the folding table from the garage. Pizza boxes would get soggy if people had to run from their cars. I was in the middle of rearranging furniture when my doorbell rang at 8:30 in the morning. The party wasn't until 2. I opened the door to find Diane standing there with her arms full of plastic storage containers and an umbrella dripping onto my welcome mat. "I brought backup decorations," she said without preamble. "Indoor alternatives in case the weather doesn't clear. And I have a folding canopy in my car if you want to set up a covered walkway from the driveway." I stared at her for a moment, then stepped back to let her in. She'd been to my house 6 times now for our monthly coffee meetings, but this was different. This was her showing up, unasked, to help. "You didn't have to do this," I said. "I know." She set the containers on my dining room table and pulled off her rain jacket. "But Emma mentioned you were worried about the weather, and I thought you might appreciate another set of hands." We spent the next hour transforming my living room and kitchen into party central. Diane had brought streamers in Emma's favorite colors, purple and silver, along with battery-operated fairy lights, paper lanterns, and enough tablecloths to cover every surface twice over. "I may have gone overboard," she admitted, holding up a banner that read "Happy Birthday" in glittering letters. Old habits. "I used to plan Brian's birthday parties like military operations." "This is perfect," I said, and I meant it. "Emma will love it." Diane paused, holding a string of lights, and looked around my living room. "You know, I judged this house when I first came here. I'm ashamed to admit that. I looked at your furniture and your decorations and your everything, really, and I made assumptions about you. I know you did. You deserved better than that. You deserve better than that now." She met my eyes. "I'm trying, Victoria. I know I can't undo years of behavior in a few months, but I'm trying." "I can see that," I said quietly, "and I appreciate it more than you know." Rachel arrived at noon with Emma, both of them carrying grocery bags full of supplies. Emma's face lit up when she saw the decorations. "Grandma, this looks amazing! And Grandma Diane, you're here!" It was still strange hearing Emma call Diane Grandma. A year ago, it would have hurt, would have felt like I was being replaced. But watching Emma hug Diane, watching Diane's carefully composed face soften with genuine affection, I felt something different. Relief, maybe. Gratitude that Emma had another person who was learning to love her properly. "Where's Dad?" Emma asked, looking around. Rachel set her bags on the counter. "He's coming later. He had something to take care of first. I caught the look that passed between Rachel and Diane, something weighted and significant, but before I could ask about it, Emma was pulling me toward the craft supplies she'd brought. "I made samples," she announced, showing me a collection of friendship bracelets in various colors and patterns. "This one is for you, Grandma. Purple and silver, your favorite colors. Well, I think they're your favorite colors. Are they?" I'd never actually told Emma my favorite colors. I'd spent so much of the past few years being whatever everyone else needed me to be that I'd forgotten I was allowed to have preferences. "They are now," I said, letting her tie the bracelet around my wrist. The guests started arriving at 2:15. Emma had invited 8 friends from school, not from Worthington Prep anymore. Rachel and Brian had transferred her to Roosevelt Elementary, the public school in their district, 3 months ago. It had been Rachel's decision, apparently. She'd told Brian that Emma needed to understand that not everyone lived in houses with 3-car garages, that real life existed outside the country club bubble. According to Rachel, Brian had argued for a week before finally agreeing. Diane had supported Rachel's position, which had helped. Emma, for her part, seemed happier. She'd made actual friends, kids who came over to play without their parents checking the property value first. I watched the children arrive, dripping rain and shedding jackets, their parents waving from cars in my driveway. Normal kids, normal parents. No one was checking to see if my furniture was expensive enough or my car was new enough. They were just grateful for a place for their children to celebrate. Margaret showed up with her husband Tom, bearing a homemade cake that put my grocery store order to shame. "I know you ordered one," she said, "but I wanted to make Emma something special. 3 layers, chocolate and vanilla marble, buttercream frosting. I remember you mentioning she couldn't decide which flavor she liked best." I hugged her hard enough to make her laugh. "You're too good to me. Nonsense. You deserve people who pay attention to what matters to you." By 3 o'clock, my small house was full of noise and laughter. Children occupied every available surface, making friendship bracelets with intense concentration. Emma moved between groups like a small social coordinator, making sure everyone had enough supplies, helping the younger kids with complicated knots. I was in the kitchen cutting vegetables for the pizza when Brian arrived. I heard the front door open, heard Emma's excited dad, and steeled myself for whatever awkwardness was about to unfold. But when Brian appeared in my kitchen doorway, something was different. He wasn't wearing his usual armor of expensive suits and practiced expressions. He was in jeans and a plain button-down shirt, and he looked uncomfortable, uncertain. "Victoria," he said formally, "thank you for hosting this. The house looks great." I nodded, not sure how to respond to this version of Brian, the one who seemed almost human. "Can I talk to you for a minute, before things get too chaotic?" I set down the knife I'd been using and followed him to my small study, the room I used as a home office, barely bigger than a closet. He closed the door and stood there for a moment, clearly struggling with whatever he'd come to say. "I owe you an apology," he finally said. "A real one, not a legal one. Not the kind where I'm covering my bases or managing a situation. An actual, genuine apology." I waited. "What I did, what I've been doing, it's inexcusable. I convinced myself I was protecting my family, creating a better life for Rachel and Emma. But really, I was trying to erase anything that reminded me of where Rachel came from because I was afraid it reflected poorly on me, on my status, on how I appeared to my colleagues and my parents, and..." He ran his hand through his hair, a gesture that made him look younger, less polished. "I'm in therapy, individual therapy, in addition to the couples counseling Diane is making us do. My therapist asked me to describe you, and I realized I'd spent 7 years trying not to see you at all, to make you invisible." "You succeeded," I said quietly. "I know, and I'm sorry. That phrase doesn't feel big enough for what I did, but I don't have better words." He met my eyes, and for the first time since I'd known him, he looked genuinely ashamed. "I convinced Rachel that you weren't important, that your contributions didn't matter because they weren't financial, that your life was small and she'd outgrown it. I poisoned her relationship with you because I was a snob and an elitist, and..." He stopped, his voice catching. "And I almost destroyed my daughter's relationship with the person who might matter most to her. Emma talks about you constantly, about Thursday afternoons and baking cookies and the stories you tell her. You've shown her more genuine love in 7 months than I have in her whole life." I didn't know what to say to that. Part of me wanted to stay angry, to hold on to the hurt. But another part, the part that had learned something about Grace in the past months, recognized how hard this was for him. "Are you changing?" I asked. "Really changing? Or is this just damage control because Diane threatened your money? Both, he admitted. At first it was about the money, about not losing the life I'd built, but the therapy, it's making me see things I didn't want to see, about my father, about how I was raised, about what I've become. I don't like it, Victoria. I don't like who I am when I look at it clearly. Then change, I said. Not for Diane's money or Rachel's approval or even Emma's love. Change because you want to be better than this. I'm trying. He looked around my small office, taking in the bookshelves full of nursing textbooks and novels, the photos of Rachel and Emma on my desk, the chair I'd reupholstered myself because I couldn't afford a new one. Your house isn't embarrassing. It's full of love. I can see that now. I'm sorry it took me so long. Thank you for saying that. We stood there in awkward silence for a moment, then Brian cleared his throat. I should get back to the party. Emma wanted me to help with the bracelet station. Apparently, I need to learn how to do a fishtail pattern. I followed him back to the main room, where chaos reigned in the best possible way. Children were everywhere, some making bracelets, some playing a card game Emma had set up in the corner, some just running around burning off energy. The noise level was tremendous. My carefully organized living room was a disaster. It was perfect. Rachel found me in the kitchen as I was arranging pizza on serving platters. You okay, Mom? Better than okay, I said. This is what I wanted for her. Just this, I know. Rachel started helping me, working in comfortable silence for a moment. Brian talked to you? He did. He's been practicing that apology for 2 weeks. His therapist made him write it out, then rewrite it, then practice it in the mirror. She gave a small laugh. It's strange, seeing him actually work at something emotional instead of just managing it away. Do you think he means it? Rachel considered this, really thought about it. I think he's starting to mean it. I don't think he fully understands yet, not completely, but he's trying. And for Brian, trying is revolutionary. We carried the pizza to the dining room table, and for the next hour, I didn't think about the past or worry about the future. I just watched Emma laugh with her friends, watched her show her father how to make a bracelet, watched her run between me and Rachel and Diane like she had an infinite supply of love to give and wanted to make sure we all got our share. When it was time for cake, Margaret's 3-layer masterpiece took center stage. Emma made a wish and blew out all 10 candles in one breath. Everyone cheered. What did you wish for? One of her friends asked. I can't tell you, or it won't come true, Emma said seriously, but she looked right at me when she said it and smiled. After cake, after the presents were opened, after Emma's friends had been picked up by their parents and the house had fallen into a comfortable, exhausted quiet, the 5 of us sat in my living room surrounded by wrapping paper and leftover decorations. Emma was curled up next to me on the sofa, half asleep, wearing at least 15 friendship bracelets on each arm. Rachel and Brian sat in chairs across from us, holding hands in a way that looked tentative but genuine. Diane had claimed my reading chair and was sipping tea from one of my mismatched mugs. This was a good day, Diane said quietly. The best day, Emma mumbled, her eyes already closed. I looked around my small, messy, imperfect living room. At the people gathered here, some of them still learning how to love me properly, all of them trying. The walls were the same walls I'd looked at for 28 years. The furniture was the same furniture I'd bought secondhand and reupholstered and made work. Nothing about the physical space had changed, but everything else had. Thank you, Grandma, Emma whispered, barely awake, for the best birthday ever. You're welcome, sweetheart, and thank you for teaching Mom how to be brave. I looked at Rachel, who had tears streaming down her face. She mouthed the words, I love you, across the room. I mouthed them back. Because here's what I'd learned in the past year. Love isn't about making yourself small enough to fit into someone else's life. It's not about accepting less than you deserve because you're afraid of being alone. It's not about paying for the privilege of being treated poorly. Real love, the kind worth having, costs something. It costs honesty and vulnerability, and the courage to say this isn't good enough when something needs to change. I'd spent 64 years learning that lesson, but now that I wasn't going to forget it. Outside, the rain had stopped. Through my window, I could see the evening sun breaking through the clouds, painting my small garden in shades of gold and amber. My garden in my yard at my house with my family gathered around me. Not the family I'd tried to fit into, the family that had learned to value what I had to offer. That felt like enough. More than enough. That felt like everything. 3 months after Emma's birthday party, I was sitting in Dr. Hammond's office for what she called a check-in session. Just me, without Rachel or Emma. The therapy had been going well enough that we'd reduced our family sessions from weekly to every other week, and Dr. Hammond wanted to see how I was processing everything individually. "How are you feeling about the progress you've made?" she asked. I thought about it, really considered the question instead of just giving the easy answer. Cautiously optimistic, I finally said, "Things are better, so much better than they were a year ago, but I still find myself waiting for the other shoe to drop." "That's completely understandable. Trust takes time to rebuild, especially when it's been broken as badly as yours was." Dr. Hammond made a note on her tablet. "Tell me about your boundaries. Are you maintaining them?" Yes, I was proud of that. Rachel asked me to babysit last week on a Thursday, my Thursday with Emma, because she had a work conflict. I told her no, that Thursdays are a scheduled time, and if she has a conflict, she needs to figure out alternative care. How did she respond? She was surprised at first. I think she expected me to just say yes like I always used to. But then she said okay, she understood, and she'd find someone else. And she did. She didn't push back or make me feel guilty about it. That's significant progress, I know. I paused. The old me would have dropped everything, would have rearranged my whole week to accommodate her. I'm trying not to be that person anymore. Dr. Hammond smiled. "You're not trying, Victoria. You're succeeding. There's a difference." After my appointment, I drove to the grocery store. I was loading bags into my car when I heard someone call my name. I turned to see Patricia Morrison, Brian's senior partner's wife, walking toward me across the parking lot. I'd met Patricia exactly twice, both times at firm events that Brian had reluctantly invited me to after the birthday party disaster. She'd been polite but distant, the way wealthy people often are with those they consider beneath their social circle. "Victoria, I thought that was you." She stopped next to my car, perfectly dressed as always, carrying a single reusable shopping bag that probably cost more than my weekly groceries. "How are you?" "I'm well, thank you." I waited, unsure what this interaction was about. "I wanted to tell you, I heard about what happened at Emma's 9th birthday party. Diane told me everything." Patricia's expression shifted, became something more genuine. "I owe you an apology. Several of us do, actually. We've been complicit in making you feel unwelcome at firm events, in treating you as less important because you're not part of our social ecosystem, I suppose." I blinked, genuinely surprised. Thank you for saying that. It's more than words, I hope. My husband and I are hosting a dinner next month. Nothing to do with the firm, just friends and family. I'd like you to come. Not as Rachel's mother, but as Victoria Hayes. As yourself. I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to refuse, to protect myself from potential hurt. But another part, the part that had been learning to be brave, recognized this for what it was. An olive branch, an opportunity. "I'd like that," I said. "Thank you." Patricia smiled, and it reached her eyes this time. "Good. I'll send you the details. And Victoria? Diane was right about you. You're stronger than any of us gave you credit for." I drove home thinking about that conversation, about how strange it was that standing up for myself had somehow earned me more respect than years of trying to fit in ever had. People, I was learning, valued those who knew their own worth. It was the ones who accepted mistreatment who got walked over. When I got home, there was a package on my front porch. No return address, just my name written in handwriting I didn't immediately recognize. Inside was a framed photo from Emma's birthday party, one I hadn't seen before. It showed me and Emma at the craft table, both of us concentrating on friendship bracelets, our heads close together. Emma was laughing at something, and I was looking at her with such open, unguarded love that it made my chest tight to see it. There was a note tucked inside. "Victoria, I took this during the party and thought you should have it. You can see in your face how much you love her, and in hers how much she trusts you. That kind of relationship is worth everything. Thank you for showing me what real family looks like. Diane." I hung the photo in my living room, right above the mantel where I'd always kept pictures of Rachel growing up. Emma's face, full of joy and trust, became the focal point of my small room. That evening, I had dinner with Margaret and Tom at their house, something that had become a weekly tradition. Over pot roast and Margaret's famous garlic mashed potatoes, I told them about Patricia's invitation. "You should go," Margaret said immediately. "Show them who you really are when you're not trying to shrink yourself to fit their expectations." "What if I don't fit?" I asked. "What if I'm still too different from their world?" Tom set down his fork and looked at me seriously. "Victoria, you've spent this whole past year learning that fitting in with people who don't value you isn't worth the effort. Why would you worry about that now? Because it's different now. Rachel is trying. Things are better. I don't want to embarrass her. Has Rachel asked you not to go?" Margaret asked. No, she doesn't even know about it yet. Then go. Be yourself. Wear what makes you comfortable, talk about what interests you, and let them deal with their own reactions. You're not responsible for making other people comfortable anymore, remember? She was right, of course. That had been one of my biggest revelations in therapy, that I'd spent decades managing other people's comfort at the expense of my own authenticity. 2 weeks later, Rachel called me on a Tuesday evening, not our usual call night. Mom, can I ask you something? Of course, Brian and I are thinking about buying a different house, something smaller, more manageable. We can't really afford the Ashford Hills place without his parents' help and with Diane's new boundaries about supporting our lifestyle. She paused. We found a house in Riverside. 3 bedrooms, older construction, needs some work. It's about 10 minutes from you. Okay, I said carefully, not sure where this was going. Would you come look at it with me before we make an offer? I want your opinion. Not about whether it's impressive or has good resale value or any of that. I want to know if you think it's a good home, the kind of place where Emma could be happy. I had to press my hand to my chest because my heart was suddenly beating too hard. You want my opinion? Yes. Your real opinion, not just you being supportive. You have good instincts about these things, and I trust your judgment more than I trust my own right now. We went to see the house that Saturday. It was a 1970s split level with dated kitchen cabinets, original bathroom fixtures, and a backyard that needed serious landscaping work. It was about a third the size of their current house in Ashford Hills. The neighborhood was solidly middle class, older cars and driveways, chain-link fences, basketball hoops over garage doors. It reminded me of where Rachel had grown up. We walked through each room, Rachel taking notes on her phone about necessary repairs. Emma ran ahead of us, claiming bedrooms and exploring closets, her excitement palpable. What do you think? Rachel asked me as we stood in the backyard, looking at the overgrown garden beds and the wooden swing set that came with the property. I think it's a home, I said. Not a showpiece, not an investment. A place where a family could actually live. That's what I thought, too. Rachel looked around, and I saw something in her face I hadn't seen in years. Peace, maybe. Or hope. Brian's terrified. He keeps talking about the firm partners judging us for downsizing, about what it means for his career. But I told him I'd rather have a smaller house and a real life than keep playing pretend in a place we can't afford. How did he react? Better than I expected. He agreed, actually, said maybe it was time to stop living beyond our means to impress people who don't actually care about us. She smiled slightly. His therapist is earning every penny Diane is paying. They made an offer on the house the following week. It was accepted 2 days later. The move happened in stages over the next 2 months. I helped Rachel pack, spending long afternoons wrapping dishes and sorting through closets. We found things she'd forgotten she had, photo albums from her childhood, cards I'd sent her over the years, a box of art projects from elementary school I'd saved and given her when she moved out. You kept all of this, she said, sitting on the floor of what had been her Ashford Hills home office, surrounded by memories. Of course I did. You were my whole world. She looked up at me, eyes bright with tears. I forgot that. For a while there, I actually forgot that. I'm sorry, Mom. I know I've said it before, but I'm sorry. For all of it. For making you feel like you didn't matter, like your love wasn't enough, like... Rachel, I sat down beside her on the floor. I forgive you. I've forgiven you. But you need to forgive yourself, too. You made mistakes, yes, but you're fixing them. That's what matters now. She leaned her head on my shoulder, and we sat there among the boxes and memories, and for the first time in years it felt easy, natural, like we'd found our way back to each other. The dinner at Patricia Morrison's house turned out to be less intimidating than I'd feared. I wore a simple black dress, nothing fancy, just something comfortable and appropriate, and reminded myself of Tom's advice, be yourself and let them deal with their own reactions. There were 12 people at dinner, including Rachel and Brian. Patricia had seated me between herself and a retired judge, who turned out to have fascinating stories about the evolution of healthcare law. We talked for an hour about nursing, about patient advocacy, about the gap between healthcare policy and actual patient care. Across the table, I caught Rachel watching me with something like pride on her face. After dinner, Patricia pulled me aside in her kitchen. Thank you for coming. And thank you for being exactly who you are. We need more real people in this circle and fewer people playing parts. I'm just me, I said. I don't know how to be anything else anymore. That's exactly what makes you valuable. On the drive home, Rachel and Brian had offered to drop me off. Brian cleared his throat from the front seat. You were the most interesting person at that dinner, he said. Everyone wanted to talk to you. I think they were just being polite." "No," Rachel said firmly. "Brian's right. You were authentic and knowledgeable and yourself." Patricia told me afterward that she wants you at every dinner party from now on. She said you make people actually think instead of just performing for each other. I didn't know what to say to that. A year ago, I would have minimized the compliment, made myself smaller to avoid seeming proud, but I'd learned better. "Thank you," I said simply. "That means a lot." Emma's 10th birthday had marked a turning point, but the real changes came in the months that followed. Small moments that added up to a complete transformation in how we related to each other. Rachel started including me in decisions, not asking permission, but genuinely wanting my input. What did I think about Emma's request for piano lessons? Did I have any advice about the conflict Rachel was having with a colleague at the clinic? Would I want to go shopping for furniture for the new house? Brian started showing up for Thursday afternoons, not to intrude, but to drop off Emma and sometimes stay for a cup of coffee. We weren't friends, probably would never be friends, but we'd reached a place of mutual respect. He was learning that I had value beyond my bank account, and I was learning that he was capable of growth, even if it was painful and slow. Diane and I continued our monthly coffee dates, and they evolved into something resembling actual friendship. She told me about her marriage, about years of enabling her husband's worst behaviors, about her regret at not standing up sooner. I told her about my late husband, about the struggle of single parenthood, about the fear that had driven so many of my decisions. "We're both learning," she said one afternoon. "Better late than never, I suppose." Emma thrived in her new school, in her new neighborhood, in the freedom to just be a kid without the pressure of maintaining appearances. She still came over every Thursday, and those afternoons remained sacred. We were working our way through a cookbook together, attempting recipes that sometimes succeeded and sometimes failed spectacularly. The failures were almost more fun than the successes. "Grandma," she said one Thursday, up to her elbows in bread dough that wasn't rising properly, "do you think people can really change? Like really, really change?" "I think people can grow," I said carefully. "If they want to and if they're willing to do the hard work. Is that what Mom and Dad are doing? Growing?" "Yes, I think so," she nodded seriously. "I'm glad. I like our family better now. Even though our house is smaller and we don't go to the country club anymore and Dad doesn't talk about work all the time, this feels more real, out of the mouths of babes, as they say." That night, after Emma had gone home, I sat in my reading chair with a cup of tea and thought about the past year, about everything that had changed and everything I'd learned. I'd learned that you can't buy love or respect, but you can lose them by accepting less than you deserve. I'd learned that standing up for yourself might cost you relationships, but those are relationships that were costing you your self-worth. I'd learned that being needed isn't the same as being valued, and that sometimes the kindest thing you can do for someone is refuse to enable their worst behaviors. I'd learned that my worth wasn't determined by my bank account, my house, my car, or how well I fit into someone else's social circle. Most importantly, I'd learned that I was enough, just as I was, with my dated kitchen cabinets and my old car and my modest retirement savings. I was enough, and I always had been. The people who couldn't see that, well, they were the ones with the problem, not me. My phone buzzed with a text from Rachel. "Thank you for today. Emma won't stop talking about the bread disaster. She wants to try again next week. Also, the movers confirmed for Saturday. Will you still come help us unpack?" I smiled and typed back, "Of course, wouldn't miss it." Another text came through, this one from Margaret. "Book club tomorrow at 7. Don't forget it's your turn to pick the next book. Choose something good." And then, surprisingly, one from Diane. "Coffee on Thursday. I'd like your advice about something. My small, imperfect life. My modest, ordinary existence." It had turned out to be enough after all. More than enough. It had turned out to be everything I needed. I looked around my living room, at the photo of Emma and me above the mantel, at the friendship bracelet still on my wrist, at the stack of books from my book club waiting to be read, at the watercolor paintings from my class hung on the wall despite their amateur quality. This was my life, my real, authentic, unfiltered life, no longer shaped by fear of abandonment or the desperate need to be necessary to people who didn't value me. Just mine. And you know what? It was a pretty damn good life. I finished my tea, turned off the lights, and went to bed. Tomorrow I had plans: lunch with Margaret, a new watercolor class session, grocery shopping for Saturday's unpacking session with Rachel. Ordinary things, normal things, perfect things. Because I'd finally learned the most important lesson of all: you don't need to be extraordinary to deserve love and respect. You just need to be yourself, set healthy boundaries, and surround yourself with people who value you for who you actually are. Everything else is just noise. And I was done listening to noise.